My name is Mike Dark.
And I am Richard Wagner.
We're back.
Do exactly as we say and no one gets hurt.
All right, we're back. Welcome to Radio Waves. My name is Mike Stark.
And I am Richard Wagner.
And it's like riding a bicycle, right, Richard? You can get back on after a certain amount of time, except in my advanced age, I have trouble riding a bicycle, so this might even be easier.
Oh, that's a good point. And you don't get hurt when you fall over.
At least not yet.
Yes.
So here we are. And why are we back? Well, when we went off, it's been a year or so ago, maybe even longer.
Yeah.
I had come to the feeling that radio was dead. All we were reporting on was people that died in the industry and people that were getting laid off, companies going bankrupt. To me, there was no good news, and that It was the sign that radio was on its way out. Now, I still feel that way, yet Richard does not. Richard still holds on to hope that things will improve, right?
Well, it's the hope that things will improve. I do realize that what you're saying is absolutely true, which is one of the reasons we're getting behind this again. What's happening with the radio companies?
Yeah, and I think we also wanted to maybe get back on so that we can still take some of the joy of radio, even if it's the past. Right. You know, we did these career spanning interviews during the first run over the first 10 years. I think we were on the air 10 years doing this. And we interviewed a lot of great radio people. Some of them are gone now.
Yes.
And we are fortunate to have in our library a great document of great radio people that have gone away, and we're pleased to have their career-spanning interviews as part of our portfolio. So we wanted to try and maybe get with those that are still here that have probably retired at this point, but are still an important part of broadcast history, and we wanted to talk to them maybe one last time. So that is the reason we are back. We're going to do it on an as-needed basis. So you never know when it's going to come. So subscribe to the podcast, and it'll alert you when we are recording something. Now, we're going to start out strong because I think we're going to come out with two quick ones that are going to come out really quick. And the first two are going to center around the recent firings at iHeart, which all indications show it's the largest firings ever. Right, Richard?
It sure seems to be. They mentioned cutting, 1,000 people one month, and then just a few months later, another 500 or something like that. It's getting to the point where there are some stations that have no local personalities anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And this is from a company that, what's their motto? Always human, or something along those lines?
Guaranteed human.
Guaranteed human.
Yes.
As they lay off hundreds and hundreds of humans.
We don't know where that human will be, but it's a human.
Yeah, exactly. So joining us now, the former 7 to 10 man on KFI, the great Mo Kelly. So I think that the recent iHeart layoffs maybe wouldn't have been so in the news if Bob Pittman, the head of it all, hadn't been ready to be inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. The guy that is at the top of this company that laid off hundreds of people all over the country, and at the same time, he's being inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. I think that put a sting in this whole thing that's bigger than the normal layoffs. What is your thought, Mo?
There's a disconnect here. There's what the company will say publicly about how strong it is, how well it is doing, how it's the leading audio distributor in the world. And then you see the layoffs, and a reasonable person would acknowledge that 3 nationwide layoffs in the past 10 months is not normal. If you don't know the name Bob Pittman, and just a funny anecdote, I saw the movie Michael for the second time, and there's a Bob Pittman MTV story in the movie.
Absolutely.
And I pointed at the screen. My wife said, "What?" I said, "That's the same guy who runs iHeart Media even to this day." I say that to say Bob Pittman specifically has had a very long tenure in this business as far as audio distribution, video content, and he's not new to this game. And I understand layoffs are inevitable to a certain extent. You know, the business will ebb and flow. The industry evolves and changes, but it's not normal, regardless of what a person inside or outside the business would see. It's not normal to have 3 national layoffs from coast to coast of varying degrees and specialties in a 10-month period. And I was caught up in the one of October of 2025. And if I wasn't caught up in that one, I might have been caught up in the next one. If I wasn't caught up in that one, I might have been caught up in the most recent one. So it's not that I'm looking at this from a personal standpoint. Right. I just think a person who is aware of the company of iHeart Media would know that something is amiss if you have 3 layoffs in 10 months.
With no prospects of changing that either. And I keep looking at it as, how many companies have ever cut themselves into success? Are there any?
I don't know. What usually happens is the company gets consolidated, company gets bought out, or they filed bankruptcy or some sort of combination of all those things. And I'm not speaking as someone who has insider information. I'm just reading the tea leaves, and I'm reading the published reports like you. There is a rumor that iHeart Media and Sirius XM may merge at some point. And we know if that is true, that means there'll be another round of layoffs and people who will lose their jobs in both iHeart Media and Sirius XM. So this is a very perilous time, not only for the company, but for the industry more broadly.
And it seems like they're always cutting the people who do the creation, the very ones who could actually change this around.
And therein lies the discussion of what creation or creatives will be in the foreseeable future. Publicly, iHeart Media said that they have a commitment to human content creation. That's what they said publicly. If we look at the industry more broadly, I don't know if they can keep that promise. I just don't know, because we know with the introduction and inclusion of AI across broad swaths of entertainment, AI is going to play a role. I can give you a link to different radio stations or content streaming stations, which are just AI voices. And this is on the heels of, I would say, the consolidation of stations where you're moving out local talent for syndication. We're familiar with that. And we know that the need for local broadcasters is lower than ever before. So there are just going to be fewer jobs for anyone to have on an industry level, not specific to iHeart Media, but it is fair to question whether iHeart Media is heading in the direction that they've publicly said that they're heading.
Well, especially when you have stations as major as KGGI and Riverside and others across the country like it that are no longer staffed at all.
That's a great point. And for those who don't know, KGGI 99.1 in Riverside is a music CHR station. So this is not just talk radio. This is music radio. This is another local station which has moved out local talent for, at least for the foreseeable future, syndicated talent. There are fewer jobs to be had. And I don't know if any of the people who've lost their jobs will have a way to re-enter it, because we're all, in theory, looking for the same jobs in the same market. And let's say I was looking for a radio job when I was let go 10 months ago. Well, now there are another 45 different people who are also in that same position looking for these same jobs. And I say it with a smile, but it's actually a frown, because it's unfortunate that many of my colleagues and your colleagues have lost their job with no realistic prospects. There are fewer music radio stations. There are fewer talk radio stations. And we have to talk about the reality of of AM radio, first being early 20th century technology. So AM radio is not going to expand. FM is not going to expand in and of what they do and what they provide. And then when you realize you have EV vehicles, which are more and more not including the AM radio band in their cars, and the explosion of cars which have their own internet capabilities, you're at a point where people can listen to whatever they want, wherever that content is being generated from, and you don't have to go through the whole thing of Bluetooth or hooking up your phone. It's getting easier and easier to not either listen to local radio or even have local radio. It's just now audio content.
I'm guilty. When I get in the car, even if I'm listening to an AM or FM station, it isn't on the AM or FM, it's on an app.
Right. And you know, and who can begrudge you? I'm listening to a lot of my favorite local stations on the app. Why? Because I want that HD quality. Yeah. And that also matters. The quality. It's hard for me to listen to, let's say, a Dodgers game on AM radio and all that interference or the lacking signal if I drive in a certain area of town, as opposed to listening to the game on Sirius XM, which I often do because they give you all the sports. That's just where all this is headed.
Yeah.
And as far as local radio goes, what do you call local radio if, even though they have their guaranteed human guarantee, if it comes from Los Angeles and you're piping it into wherever, Pittsburgh even?
Well, let's be honest. I could be listening to local radio on AM dial, and I won't call out the station's name, but there are a number of stations which will pipe in their news breaks from Arizona and other places. So you're thinking to content which is being locally generated with local hosts, and in actuality, it isn't. We have hosts who are broadcasting as a local talent in other markets. We have news coming, which is being generated from other markets. So the whole idea and concept of local radio is constantly and presently evolving.
You mentioned briefly the AI component to this, and AI could fairly easily be integrated into music radio, but how will they ever integrate AI into a talk format? I don't see that happening.
Don't know that it would be talk format in this present conception. Like if you have someone who's going to extemporaneously pontificate on the news of the day and talk about what's happening at City Hall or what's happening on the national scene, probably not that. But in the way that we can track programs for music radio, you can track commentaries using AI, the evolution of what we consider to be a talk outlet may also change. It works as far as news announcement right now. It works as far as new print news generation. There are a lot of news outlets, print news outlets, and I need not tell Richard about this, which are employing AI in the creation of their news stories. Like LA Times many years ago had an AI QuakeBot where it would generate a story immediately after an earthquake took place. And it would give you all the specifics and a little bit of editorial commentary and context. And that was years ago. So that was my sign and indication that we were headed in a direction where at least information dissemination was not going to be limited or only relegated to human input.
Yeah, but you'll never get a show, and I hate to refer back to your show on KFI, but you'll never get a show like that covers a wide variety of things and is all over the board. You used to do everything on that show. The AI is not going to be capable of providing that.
I appreciate that, and I respect and receive that, but I actually disagree with that. Really? If only because if we pass this prologue, and if we look at other industries, if you look at the music industry, if you would have told me 5 years ago that AI just can't create songs out of nothing, there has to be a human inspiration component to it. And then in the course of just doing my show, I'm covering stories where you have these songs created out of nowhere, which are mimicking The Weeknd or Drake and creating songs, complete songs. Some of them even sound good. I'm not going to put a limitation on what can be created. Now, it may change our concept of what is talk radio. I'm sure they can do an AI right now, which can give some semblance of a commentary about stories going on in the news. Is it as inventive and creative as human input? Maybe not now. 2 years from now, who's to say?
The irony is they call their company iHeart, and the heart seems to be being pulled out of it to some degree.
It's heart disease.
Look, I'm not going to single out iHeart in that regard. I don't believe that corporate media cares about any of us. Not you, Mike, not you, Richard, not me. And they're always going to do which is in its financial best interest. We could talk about fast food and say McDonald's and say, well, you know what? We need to pay our workers more, $20 an hour. Okay, that's fine. But inevitably, fast food is looking for a way to produce that food at a lower cost. And the easiest way to do that is to get rid of the personnel. Get rid of the payroll taxes, get rid of the benefits, get rid of the people going off on vacation, get rid of the people who are calling in sick. Corporations and by extension, corporate media have always had a responsibility to their shareholders, stockholders, to maximize the amount of revenue and decrease the amount of expenses. And that's not going to be different in any industry. We're going to see it in terms of automation. We've seen it in radio. We've seen it automation in terms of fast food. You got kiosks now that you have all sorts of ways where the computer is doing the work. You can't call a corporation now and actually talk to a person. You're just talking to something which probably is an AI chatbot. You have to go through hell to get to a real person, and that's going to be a progression. So I don't necessarily think it's the fault of one company, but I'm sure that all these companies are using the same playbook. Hell, how many jobs were lost just in this conversation we have right now? We don't have a classical physical engineer. We don't have a cameraman who is working doing this. We don't have someone who's monitoring the levels. And I say that respectfully and lovingly of a bygone era. This advancement in technology is a blessing and a curse, because we could not have this conversation as it is 10 years ago. It would be impossible. The technology wasn't there for it. Now we can have them whenever we want. We don't need to rent a studio space, a podcast space. How many jobs have been lost in that regard? Look, I came from the music industry. What's the point of having a physical recording studio? What's the point of having a mastering studio like Ernie Grundman, legends in the business? What's the point of having these specialized disciplines where we can go to Guitar Center, assuming it stays in business anytime soon, doesn't go out of business, and buy $1,000 worth of equipment and create our own songs, create our own podcasts, create our own content with the help of nobody.
You're right about this double-edged sword thing. Now, I'm retired. Richard's retired. You have a long career in front of you in audio and media and all of that.
I wish.
How do you maneuver from this point on? How do you personally maneuver?
Oh, that's a great point. And I'm at the age, for those who don't know, I'm 56. And for those who don't know, 56 is right on the precipice where I know that there's someone who's half my age, who may be twice as hungry, who's willing to work for half the money in a traditional sense, which would age me out. I know I'm already aged out of the music industry, which I originally came from. And as far as talk radio, you'll turn on like a sports radio station and the hosts are anywhere in their late 30s to mid 40s. That's like the sweet spot for sports radio. And the talk radio, it's a little bit older, but not necessarily a lot. And I'm not even sure about the talk format as it's presently presented, what that means. And so I'm caught in between. You have this AI explosion. You have this corporate consolidation and all these layoffs where the market is flooded with all sorts of talent and competition, most of whom are younger than me and maybe are willing to work for less money than me.
Yeah.
But we're all competing in theory for the same jobs and the same slots, with the exception of what many of us are doing now, are creating our own platforms and spaces to create content. So when you respectfully say to me, Mike, that, hey, I have more career in front of me, maybe, it doesn't mean that I have more career in front of me in a classic traditional sense.
Gotcha.
Now, there are things that I may do with television broadcasting to prolong what I do right now,
Right.
but there's really no guarantee that there's another radio job as we've classically known it for me.
Well, I don't worry about you, Mo. You are the busiest guy in the world. You're on TV. You're doing spots on every station, and I don't know if any of that pays or whatever. So that's the thing. How do you monetize all of these things that you got going? Because a lot of them don't monetize at all, I guess.
They all work together, and that's the only way I can say it. It used to be when I was doing TV hits on like CNN, that was all for free. In other words, they were saying, well, we're giving you exposure. You don't need anything from me. And it's like, no, I actually need some money. And CNN, being completely transparent, strung me along saying, yeah, we're going to do a deal with you where you be a paid contributor. And for those who don't know, if you see someone on CNN or MS Now or Fox News and they say Fox News contributor, MS Now contributor, CNN contributor, that means they're actually a paid employee or contractor for the network. If they should just show Mo Kelly, host of the Mo Kelly Experience podcast, that means they're not getting any money. So, but it works all together. In other words, I use one to fuel the other.
Sure.
I'm a paid contributor with Spectrum News, SoCal. So, when you see me, they will introduce me as Spectrum News contributor Mo Kelly. So I am monetized in that way. And I do other things, appear on other people's podcasts to keep my visibility on a certain level. Right. And part of being in demand is the idea that people want to see you and hear from you. Sure. So I will go on anyone's podcast. I'll go on anyone's show to keep my brand and name out there. But not everything is done for some sort of fee. I wish it was, but it just doesn't work that way.
And you use social media very well. You're a master at using social media, and that's part of the equation as well, right?
I wouldn't say I'm a master at social media because you have what I call kids, people in their 20s and 30s who put up really not great content. And they all of a sudden have millions of followers, which goes back to your monetization conversation, and they can then monetize that. And they make something out of nothing. And I don't want to denigrate what they do because they have created a lot of times a platform and place by themselves and about just themselves, and they're able to monetize it. But if you come from a traditional broadcaster background, there are a lot of podcasters out there saying that's just straight garbage. They're not managing a conversation well. They're not providing interesting content, but they have an audience. And so mastering social media is about developing that audience that you can then monetize. That's my a benchmark for being a master of social media. Now, I love creating content which engages people and gets people to have discussions. That's where I think my sweet spot is. And I think that I do that well, but it's not something I really monetize. I use that so people will have me on their shows, and that's my monetization. What I do on social media helps what I do on Spectrum News. That's how, in my mind, it all works together. So people, if they want to see more of what they saw on Spectrum News, they may be curious and they'll find me on Facebook.com and things like that.
Gotcha.
I actually thought of that because your commentaries that you do on Facebook are stellar. They're very well thought out. They are engaging.
They really are. You're an amazing writer, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And that comes from being a writer. In my ignorance, and I do mean ignorance and arrogance, in my early 20s, I wanted to write an editorial and get it in the LA Times. And I was told by everyone, oh, you'll never do that. You have to get by this editor. You have to get by that. And it's really difficult. And the first thing I wrote got published. And I thought that, well, it's always going to be that easy. But it did start me down the path of being a writer. Right. And being a writer, and Richard knows this as well as anyone, you have to think about not only your piece, but the likely questions which come out of it in response to that. And you always have to answer them in your piece, where you understand that you're writing to a large audience, not necessarily a very narrow audience. And in practicing being a writer, because I didn't come out of a broadcast journalism background, traditional, I had to learn the craft and be better at the craft, and being better as a writer. That's how the BBC found me. And I started doing commentaries with them, radio commentaries. Well, I wasn't classically trained as a radio commentary person. Now, I grew up listening to talk radio.
Sure.
I am a student of Paul Harvey. And now you know the rest of the story. So if people who know me and people who know my history will know that I'm an acolyte of Paul Harvey. People who know me and know what I do know that I'm an acolyte of James Lipton and Inside the Actor Studio, and how he managed an interview and brought things out of a guest. There are some things that I've learned from people, adopted from and stole. The interview format of Larry King, that's me. I stole a lot from him. So if there's anything I do well, it's from other people. I had great teachers that I learned from explicitly and implicitly. One of the best interviewers in sports broadcasting, Jim Rome, my first radio boss. Ryan Seacrest does a hell of an entertainment interview. Tavis Smiley does a hell of a politics and a cultural affairs interview style. I adopted all of that. Yeah. And that's kind of applicable to anything I do. So going back to social media, it is a ripe place to have these formal and informal conversations with the general public. And for me to do it well, it's not just what you write, it's making sure that your facts are together. It's making sure that your information that you're giving is accurate, historically accurate, and that you can also speak to a younger and older audience, that you can have historical reference points that people can identify with, or that you can add facts and historical facts that people didn't know, because there's so much out there that you're competing with. You have to stand out in a certain way. And I'm a firm believer. I don't believe everything I think. What I mean by that is, just because a thought comes in my mind, it doesn't mean that it's right. But I have to go over it for sometimes weeks and months before I actually put it out there. I have to have it vetted. And, and a lot of times you just see people put BS out there that's not vetted. It's like, you really can't believe that. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who put out stuff that they just believe everything they think without going through the process of vetting it, of validating it, making sure it's factually accurate in the way that you have traditional media, or you'd have to pass through a copy editor, and you'd have to pass through a number of editors before something's actually published. Those days are gone. So people just put up anything and everything. And I think we suffer from a degree of media illiteracy where we don't know what is factual. In other words, what is news and what is opinion and editorial.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And you see it all over the social media, especially.
And that's why your pieces are so thought-provoking.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Richard.
I was actually when I read this stuff, I actually was thinking, oh, Larry King.
Yes.
Yes. Paul Harvey, all the guys you mentioned. That's who I was thinking of when I read
And if
this
you're
stuff.
aware of that, it's like, oh yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Any of us that have been in radio have stolen from somebody, I think.
I would hope so.
To some degree. I've got one more question, and this is just, I'm just curious. All of this discussion we've had, do you miss the platform of radio at this point? Is there something in your heart still that wishes you were still keying that mic, going over the airwaves?
I love radio. There's not a day that goes by that I don't miss the ability to talk about what is going on in the world, to be able to reach people in their cars, in their headphones, in their earbuds, and be able to speak to not only the important issues, but the unimportant issues. There is something, and I need not tell either of you, there is something very intoxicating about the microphone, not from a power standpoint. It's not like I have this microphone, I have control, but it's more like I get to release all these thoughts, all these feelings, to be able to interject, hopefully, what I believe to be more context, color, texture, hue in a conversation, not just this or that, because there are a lot of things in the spectrum of ideas which I believe are missed in our conversations today. And our conversations tend to be bombastic, dogmatic, with very little nuance, with very little respect for the fact that, we don't go through the whole day and just talk about sports or just talk about politics or just talk about entertainment. Our conversation here has touched upon a lot of things. And I hope in our various conversations at home, they're wide ranging and varying in subject matter. And I miss the opportunity to provide that, where I can sit down and say, you know what, I would love to be on the radio right now and talk about the U.S. Men's National World Cup team. I would love that opportunity to talk about not only the geopolitical implications, but also the historical implications from a sports standpoint. And I don't think that there are a lot of people on radio today who would be able to do both, because both are a part of that story. I would love to be able to talk about the U.S. men's national team with Clinton Dempsey or Landon Donovan and how that is different or similar to this particular team. I would love to talk about the history of FIFA and how it's been largely viewed as a corrupt organization and how people sometimes view what happened with the change in the red card through that lens. I would love to talk about how sports is the point where we want to feel or believe that it is honest, that it is sincere, that we're looking at true competition and it is pure and it is not somehow tainted by either politics or outside forces. We want to be able to believe that we're watching the NBA and not have to deal with DraftKings and FanDuel and the gambling and wondering whether it is somehow corrupted and has not been taken over by outside forces. And I would like to be able to talk about all those things in regard to the men's national team and how they got their ass kicked yesterday, which really broke my heart. It was embarrassing. So to answer your question, yes, I do miss it. I miss it madly because I love radio, not just as a host, but as a medium of information and entertainment.
Yeah. Well, I've said it before, whenever we close an interview with you, I never worry about you, Mo, because I know you're going to land in something good through all of this because of the passion you put into everything you do. And we appreciate you coming on this little podcast and hanging with us and talking about the issues. And hopefully we can have you back again now that we've cranked this baby back up again.
Oh, by all means, whenever you want me. And if I could, let me just say this. I am a firm believer that I and everyone is a sum total of our advocates. If I've gotten here, it's because people poured into me. It could have been a coach. It could have been a pastor. It could have been my parent who beat my behind and made sure I did not go too far astray. All those things, the sum total of people who were looking out for me, even though I wasn't necessarily looking out for myself. When I started as a host in radio, it was you, Mike Stark, who said, hey, please come on with me. And you gave me a platform to introduce me. It was you, Richard Wagner, and said, who is this new guy at KFI? Let me talk to him and see what he's about. Let me listen to him and see if he has something to say. And you wrote about me. And I would say in a very positive way, which helped me. So if I've done anything well, it's because those who have been a part of that equation and variables of my advocates to help either expose me to more people or encourage other people to give me a chance. And so I say respectfully and lovingly, thank you, gentlemen.
You are very welcome.